A federal judge has ruled that President Donald Trump's name was added to the Kennedy Center illegally. He's also blocked the administration from closing the National Cultural and Arts Center for major renovations. U.S. District Judge Christopher Cooper said the Kennedy Center board, quote, overstepped its statutory bounds by unilaterally adding Trump's name to the center. Congress gave the Kennedy Center its name, and only Congress can change it, he said. The judge also ruled the Kennedy Center's board violated the law in March by deciding to close the facility, calling the decision, quote, ill-informed and seemingly preordained. The administration had announced that work would begin in July and last approximately 2 years, but the ruling halts those plans for now. The judge, who was nominated to the bench by Democratic President Barack Obama, ordered the defendants to remove Trump's name from the institution's facade and any official materials, such as digital or physical signs, within 2 weeks. Last year, Trump installed a hand-picked board for the Kennedy Center that named him as chairman. Preservation organizations and a Democratic lawmaker challenged the Kennedy Center project in hearings held in April. The Kennedy Center Vice President of Public Relations.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Jack Mockler is here as well. This is happening right now. Trump tried to slap his name on the Kennedy Center in massive bronze letters, but a federal judge ruled it illegal and ordered it all taken down within 2 weeks, with workers scrambling behind tarps in a storm to remove them. Furious, Trump threatened to shut the place down out of spite, turning the failed rebrand into a viral humiliation. But before we dive any deeper into this incredible saga, let me be completely straight with you about something important. You simply cannot trust mainstream media anymore to give you the full picture without their own agenda baked in. That's exactly why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories with real context and absolutely zero corporate spin or hidden narratives. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines and understand what's actually happening in American politics, join our free newsletter right now.
But Nate, I want to ask you about another topic relating to president and getting some pushback concerning the Kennedy Center. Of course, a federal court ruling last week against the president's attempt to rename. So what is the latest development on this?
Yeah, the president being told he's got 20 days, or rather the Kennedy Center has 20 days to take his name off the side of the building. You've all seen the photos and videos that his name was inserted above John F. Kennedy's name. The judge, the ruling last week that they have to remove that name, as it was Congress, not the Kennedy Center's board, that initially set the name of the institution. That institution does receive federal funds. And so for all of those reasons, President Trump's name is not on there legally, at least according to that federal judge. Now, President Trump hitting back quite strongly on Truth Social, apparently backing down. I want to read a portion of this Truth Social message for you here, Steph. He said, quote, "We are going to be working with Congress to transfer this failing institution back to them so they can make a determination about what to do with it." He continues, quote, "Unless I am free to do what I do better than anyone else, bring this institution back physically, financially, and artistically, I have no interest in continuing what could be only a hopeless journey into never, never land." So President
We'll send the news straight to your inbox every single day so you never miss a crucial development. Just click the link in the description to join our community. And if you just want to support what we're doing and be part of something meaningful, join us. Be part of a community that genuinely cares about the truth, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might be. All right, now let's get back to this absolutely wild story. You may have heard throughout the years that President Trump has a thing for putting his name on buildings. Growing up in New York, you would drive around and see Trump this, Trump that, everywhere you looked. It was his brand, his signature move. Well, as president, he took that same instinct and applied it to the Kennedy Center, the prestigious performing arts center that has stood as a cultural landmark for decades. Suddenly, it became the Trump Kennedy Center, at least in signage and official materials. But now a judge has apparently said, no, you can't do that either. What was that ruling about exactly? They said that I thought we knew this already, that Congress had to act.
backing down here, a rare instance of the president backing down after a federal judge ruled against him. Remains to be seen just how much more this would go through the courts if this is something that can make it all the way to the Supreme Court. This lawsuit, by the way, brought in part by Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, the Democrat from Ohio. She is a member of the Kennedy Center board, an ex officio member of the board because she serves in Congress. She sued the Kennedy Center and the Trump administration for making that choice to change the organization's name to the Donald J. Trump and John F. Kennedy Center last year. Again, that lawsuit appears to have been effective for now. A lot of questions about whether President Trump will continue with this posture of backing off the Kennedy Center or if he will try to make yet another play to take over that institution. This is also notable, Steph, because the Kennedy Center was actually supposed to shut down for a 2-year renovation quite soon. The Kennedy Center board now has to possibly reconsider that decision as well as part of this latest ruling.
Certainly that could mean we get more or additional shows coming to the Kennedy Center if that 2-year closure for renovations does not end up happening. So a lot of potential change there. Certainly something that we'll continue to keep our eyes on. Scripps News senior congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed, as always.
I mean, you needed an act of Congress. And this was pretty well known, and he just had someone write his name, didn't he? Well, that's pretty much what happened. When it happened, everybody was saying, no, you can't do this. This is a specifically designated institution. It will require an act of Congress for the renaming. And like many other decisions, he did what he wanted to do. And now a judge has said, no, you can't do that. And in fact, the name has to come down. And then a federal judge comes in and says, nope, take it down. Not in a month, not in a year, 14 days. Come on. That is wild. That is absolutely wild. That is exactly what happened here. And if you have not heard about this yet, buckle up, because this story has everything. It has got a furious president. It has got a federal judge dropping a hammer. It has got workers sneaking around in the middle of the night behind giant tarps, ripping bronze letters off a wall like they are defusing a bomb. And it has got Trump on his own social media.
Just the last few hours, a federal judge says President Trump cannot officially rename the Kennedy Center. The new filing just in says Congress gave the Kennedy Center its name, and only Congress can change it, ordering the administration to remove the new signage and change the website in the next 14 days. The judge will also stop the president from closing the performing arts facility for 2 years while it goes through repair work. However, it does not prevent work from actually getting done. Democratic Congresswoman Joyce Beatty is on board and brought the lawsuit. On the board, and brought the lawsuit. And she writes in a statement to NBC News, quote, the Kennedy Center is an institution that belongs to the American people, not to Donald Trump. The president has taken a hands-on approach to the Kennedy Center, naming himself the chair and undoing the board. But you can see ticket sales have been dropping dramatically, down by more than 50% from last year. That according to a New York Times analysis. NBC's Monica Alba is at the White House with this. Monica, talk us through this ruling. Why does this judge say the president's name has to come down and that the closure has to stop?
Basically threatening to shut the whole place down out of spite. Yeah, you heard that right. Out of spite. And people wonder why this story went viral overnight. Let us set the scene real quick. Back in late May, U.S. District Judge Christopher Cooper looked at what Trump and his allies did to the Kennedy Center and said, this is illegal. Straight up illegal. See, the Kennedy Center is not just some random building. Congress created it decades ago to honor President John F. Kennedy. That is literally the whole point of it. It is not the Trump Center. It is not Trump Presents the Kennedy Center. It is the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. And only Congress, not a president, not a board, nobody else gets to change that name. That is how the law works. That is how it has always worked.
It's exactly what you pointed to in the introduction, Tom, which is this issue of Congress needing to play a role in this, that this isn't something that can be done arbitrarily by the Kennedy Center board, which, remember, the president did appoint many of his own allies to, and that is when they had this overwhelming vote to try to advance some of what the president wanted to see happen to the very historic building and memorial to former President John F. Kennedy. And so that is where you saw all of these different changes take place. But this judge is saying that that is not the way that it should have happened potentially. Now, what's interesting here is that in this ruling, they're saying essentially that the Kennedy Center shouldn't go forward with its planned closure, but they had already laid off a lot of the staff in anticipation of what they thought would be a closure. So it's unclear exactly what is going to happen to that part of it, which is interesting, of course, to us, Tom, but also to the fact that the president did have his own name, as you see there in that video, affixed to the outside of the Performing Arts Center. And if it is going to come down within the next couple of weeks, when exactly that's going to happen is unclear.
But somehow, someway, Trump's name ended up plastered all over the building anyway, on the facade, on the website, on official materials. And when the judge caught wind of it, he did not just say, "Hey, maybe reconsider this." No, he ordered it gone, removed, erased within 2 weeks. Are you kidding me? 2 weeks? That is the kind of ruling that makes you spit out your coffee. Now, here is where it gets really juicy. The deadline was June 12th. And what happens right as that deadline hits? Storms rolled through Washington. I mean, come on. You cannot make this stuff up. The weather practically became part of the plot. Workers had already started putting up scaffolding that afternoon, but the storms pushed everything back. So instead of a nice, clean daytime removal, it turned into a rush overnight operation in the early hours of June 13th. Picture it. Dead at night, streetlights cutting through the dark, a massive tarp thrown up over the entrance so nobody could see what was happening. And behind that tarp, crews are up there pulling down more than a dozen bronze letters one by one until the whole name was gone. In about 30 minutes, the entire thing wiped clean off the building. 30 minutes. That is faster than it takes some of us to decide what to watch on Netflix. And while all of this is happening in the dark, guess what Trump is doing? He is not out there supervising. He is not calling the judge to work things out like an adult. No, he is on Truth Social typing away furious. He called the judge an anti-Trump hater. Classic move, right? Anytime any judge rules against him, suddenly that judge is corrupt, biased, out to get him personally. It is never maybe I broke the law. It is always the system is rigged against me. But here's the part that should really get your attention. Trump did not just complain about the judge. He threatened the whole building. He said the Kennedy Center would, and I am paraphrasing here, soon be closed, probably never to open again. Let that sink in for a second. This is a national landmark, a place where kids go on field trips, where orchestras play, where Broadway shows tour through, and the President of the United States is out here saying, "Fine, if I cannot have my name on it, maybe it just should not exist anymore." Like a kid taking his ball and going home. Except the ball here is a cultural institution that belongs to the entire country. And get this, he even tried to pin the blame somewhere else. He said it was not even his idea to put his name up there in the first place. He claimed it was the board that did it, that they thought it would be good for the institution. So basically, he is saying, "Hey, do not look at me, blame the board." Meanwhile, Judge Cooper's ruling straight up said the board overstepped its statutory bounds. Translation, the board broke the rules too. So everybody involved in this thing was operating outside the law. Every single person in that chain. So yeah, this is way more than just a story about some letters on a wall. This is about power. This is about whether a president can just rename, rebrand, and reshape a national institution because he feels like it. This is about court standing up and saying, actually no, there are rules, and you do not get to skip them just because you are the president. And trust me, this is not going away. Trump filed an emergency appeal trying to stop this whole thing from happening. Both the original judge and the appeals court told him no, flat out denied. And on top of that, the Justice Department, his own Justice Department, had to file paperwork certifying that all his signage was gone inside, outside, and online. Every trace wiped. So stick around because in part 2, we are going to break down exactly how this whole mess got started, why most people online are getting the real story completely twisted, and why this fight is way bigger than just a building in Washington. And in part 3, we are going to connect the dots on what this means for the rest of Trump's term and why this might just be round 1 of a much bigger fight over power, courts, and who really controls this country's biggest institutions. Let us get into it. All right, so let us really dig into this because a lot of people are seeing headlines about Trump's name removed from Kennedy Center, and they think it is just some petty little culture war spat. A rich guy lost his vanity project. Who cares, right? But no, this is way deeper than that. And honestly, most people are completely missing the real story here. So let us slow down and actually break it apart piece by piece. First, you have got to understand what the Kennedy Center actually is. This is not some random theater. This is the official living memorial to President John F. Kennedy. Congress set it up that way. It is not owned by one political party. It is not a personal project for whoever happens to be sitting in the Oval Office. It belongs to the American people, and his whole identity since the day it opened has been tied to honoring JFK. That is the deal. That has always been the deal. No exceptions. So when Trump's name suddenly shows up all over the building, on the facade, on the website, on official materials, that is not just decorating. That is rewriting history. That is taking a monument built for one president and slapping another president's name on it while he is still in office. Come on, think about how wild that actually is. Imagine if a different president tried to rename the Lincoln Memorial after themselves while they were still serving. People would absolutely lose their minds, and rightfully so. This is the exact same situation, and that is exactly the argument Judge Cooper made in his ruling. He was not out here making some wild, extreme, politically charged decision. He looked at the law, plain and simple, and said, Congress designated this place to honor Kennedy, and only Congress has the authority to change that. Not a president, not a board appointed by a president. Congress. That is it. That is the whole legal argument. And honestly, it is pretty hard to argue with because it is not really about politics at all. It is about who has the actual legal power to rename a federally chartered institution. And spoiler alert, it is not the guy running the executive branch. Now, here is where most people get confused, or honestly where a lot of the online conversation just gets it flat out wrong. Some people are out there saying, oh, this is just judge bias, the courts are just mad, he is popular, they are trying to erase him from history. But that is not what happened here at all. Nobody erased Trump from history. His name is still everywhere else. What got erased was an illegal rebranding of a building that legally was never his to rename. There's a huge difference between we are erasing your legacy and you broke federal law by putting your name on something you were not authorized to touch. Those are two completely different things. But a lot of folks online are mixing them together like it is the same story. It is not even close. On the flip side, you have also got people acting like this was some massive, permanent, decisive victory, like the whole fight is over and done. And, yeah, not exactly, because remember, Trump's team tried to fight this. They filed an emergency petition with the U.S. Court of Appeals trying to pause the judge's order before the deadline even hit. Both the original judge and the appeals court said no, denied, not happening. So this was not just one rogue judge making a call in a vacuum. It went up the chain and still got shut down. That matters. That is not nothing. That is the system working exactly the way it is supposed to. Let us also talk about the theatrics here, because honestly, the way this whole thing played out was almost like a spy movie. You had scaffolding going up in broad daylight on the actual deadline day. Then storms rolled in and pushed the whole removal past the court's cutoff time. So instead of a smooth plan, we did it on time situation. The administration blew right past its own legal deadline. And then scrambling to catch up, crews threw a massive tarp over the entrance late that night. Then behind that curtain, more than a dozen bronze letters came down. In about 30 minutes, gone. Now think about that visual for a second. A tarp in the middle of the night hiding the removal of a president's name from public view. It is almost symbolic, right? Like you put your name up in broad daylight, proud, bold, big bronze letters for everyone to see, and then it comes down in the dark, hidden behind the curtain because nobody wants the cameras catching that moment. That is not a coincidence. That is optics. That is a story that is basically writing itself in real time. And here is another piece people are completely sleeping on. This was not just a physical sign coming down. The Justice Department, Trump's own DOJ, had to formally certify to the court that every single reference to Trump was removed, not just the big bronze letters outside, everything inside the building, on the website, in official materials. Kennedy Center officials confirmed it publicly, telling major news outlets that every single reference inside, outside, and online have been wiped clean. That is a pretty humiliating thing to have to formally put in a legal filing. Imagine having to write an official government document that basically says, "Yes, Your Honor, we double-checked there's officially zero Trump left in this building." Ouch! Now, let us talk about Trump's reaction, because man, this is where it gets almost comedic. If it were not so serious, instead of saying, okay, the courts made their call, we will respect the process, he went straight to attack mode, called the judge an anti-Trump hater. And look, we have seen this pattern before, right? Anytime a ruling does not go his way, it is never the law says I was wrong. It is always the judge is biased. The system is rigged. This is a witch hunt. At some point, you have got to ask, is every single judge who rules against you biased? Or is it maybe, just maybe, that the law is the law? Come on now. But then he took it even further. He threatened that the Kennedy Center would soon be closed, probably never to open again. And can we just sit with that for a second? This is not a private building he owns. This is a national performing arts center that serves the entire country. Kids go there for school trips. Veterans get honored there. Broadway shows tour through there. Orchestras from all over the world perform on that stage. And the reaction to losing a naming fight is threatening to shut the whole thing down. That is not leadership. That is not even close to leadership. That is straight up throwing a tantrum with a national landmark as the hostage. Yeah, I said it. And on top of that, he tried to shift the blame entirely onto the board. Said they were the ones who thought putting his name up would be, and I am paraphrasing, good for a dying institution. But here is the kicker. Judge Cooper's ruling already addressed that. He said the board itself overstepped its statutory bounds, so it is not like the board has some special legal authority to do this, and Trump is just an innocent bystander. No, the ruling says the board broke the rules too. Everybody involved was operating outside what the law actually allows. So blaming the board does not really hold up, does it? Now, why does all of this actually matter beyond just a funny story about letters coming off a wall? Because this is part of a much bigger pattern we have been watching throughout Trump's second term. Courts again and again stepping in to say, hold on, there are limits. Even for a president, we have seen it with immigration policy. We have seen it with funding fights. And now we are seeing it with cultural institutions every single time. The argument from Trump's side is the same. Unelected judges are sabotaging the agenda, blocking the will of the people. And every single time, the courts respond with the same basic point: we are not blocking anything. We are just enforcing the laws that Congress already wrote. That is it. That is the entire tension right there in a nutshell. So when you step back and look at the big picture, this is not really about signs. It is about whether one person, even the most powerful person in the country, gets to unilaterally rewrite the identity of a national institution just because he wants his name on it. And so far, at least in this case, the answer from the courts has been a pretty firm no. But do not think for a second this is the last we will hear about it. All right, let us move into part 3 and actually break down what this means going forward. All right, so let us break this whole thing down into simple, clear points, because there is a lot going on here, and I want you walking away from this video actually understanding what happened and why it matters. So let us go point by point. A judge ruled the rebranding illegal, and the deadline forced a chaotic, embarrassing scramble. Judge Christopher Cooper ruled that slapping Trump's name on the Kennedy Center violated federal law. Simple as that. He gave a strict 2-week deadline to get it all removed. And what happened? Storms hit right as the deadline landed and pushed the whole operation into a rush overnight scramble. Scaffolding went up during the day. Then behind a giant tarp, crews pulled down more than a dozen bronze letters in about 30 minutes overnight. That is not exactly a smooth, dignified process, is it? It is a, we are blowing past our own legal deadline and doing this in the dark kind of process. And honestly, that alone tells you a lot about how this whole thing went down from start to finish. Trump tried to fight it in court and lost twice. This is important because some people online are acting like Trump just quietly accepted this. Nope. His administration filed an emergency petition with the U.S. Court of Appeals trying to pause Judge Cooper's order before it could take effect, and both the original judge and the appeals court shut it down, denied. So this was not a rogue judge acting alone. It went up the chain and got confirmed at every level. The Justice Department, again, his own DOJ, had to file a formal certification, telling the court that every bit of Trump signage was gone. And Kennedy Center officials backed that up publicly, telling major news outlets that every single reference to Trump inside, outside, and online had been wiped clean. That is a full, total removal, not a partial one. Now that we took down most of his situation, all of it, every last letter, every pixel online, gone. Trump's response was not exactly what you would call measured or gracious. Instead of accepting the ruling, he jumped on Truth Social and called the judge an anti-Trump hater. And then he took it a step further, threatening that the Kennedy Center would soon be closed, probably never to open again. Come on, that is a threat against a national cultural institution because he lost a legal fight over a name. And then to top it all off, he tried to shift blame onto the board, saying they were the ones who thought his name would be good for the institution. But the ruling already made it clear the board overstepped its bounds too. So basically everybody involved broke the rules, and instead of owning any of it, the response was blame, threats, and insults. Classic playbook. We have seen it before. This is way bigger than one building, and it fits into a much wider pattern. This whole situation is part of a much larger story we have been watching play out again and again during Trump's second term. Courts stepping in over and over to draw a line and say, hey, there are limits even for the president. We have seen it with immigration. We have seen it with funding decisions, and now we are seeing it with the naming of one of the most important cultural landmarks in the entire country. And every single time it is the same script. Trump and his allies call it lawfare. They claim the judges are out to get him personally, and the courts respond the same way every single time. We are just applying the law that Congress already wrote. That is the tension defining this entire era of American politics right now, and the Kennedy Center fight is just the latest and maybe most dramatic chapter of it. Now, let us talk about why this actually matters beyond the drama of it all, because on the surface, sure, it is a story about bronze letters coming off a building, but underneath that, this is a story about power, about whether a sitting president can just rebrand a national institution because he wants his name attached to it, about whether courts can actually hold that power in check even when the person holding the power is the most powerful person in the entire country. And in this case, at least for now, the answer was yes, they can. And they did. And that is not a small thing. It also connects to a much bigger culture war happening across the entire country right now. Think about it. Military bases getting renamed, then sometimes renamed back. University buildings facing pressure over whose name is on the door. Cultural institutions caught in the middle of political fights over legacy, memory, and who gets honored in America's public spaces. This Kennedy Center fight is just one very visible, very dramatic example of that much bigger battle. A battle that is not going anywhere anytime soon. So, who actually benefits here? Well, in the short term, you could argue the courts come out looking strong, showing they are willing to enforce limits even against a sitting president. Congress benefits too in a weird way because this ruling reaffirmed that naming rights for institutions like the Kennedy Center stay exactly where they are supposed to be, in the hands of the legislature, not the executive branch. And honestly, you could argue the Kennedy family benefits here as well, since the whole point of this fight was protecting the legacy that building was originally created to honor in the first place. What comes next? Well, do not expect this to quietly fade away. Trump has already shown he is willing to fight, appeal, and lash out publicly when things do not go his way. If similar moves get attempted elsewhere, other museums, other federal buildings, other programs expect the exact same pattern to repeat. Legal battles, public backlash, and probably a whole lot more late-night tarp-covered scaffolding scrambles just like this one. And here's something else worth really thinking about. This whole saga raises a bigger question about how we treat national symbols in general. Presidents come and go. Every 4 or 8 years, somebody new sits behind that desk. But institutions like the Kennedy Center are supposed to last way longer than any one administration. That is kind of the whole point of a national landmark. It is not supposed to be a trophy case for whoever happens to be in office at the time. It is supposed to represent something bigger than any single person, something that belongs to all of us, no matter who we voted for, So, when a sitting president tries to slap his own name on something that was built specifically to honor someone else, it kind of undercuts that whole idea, does it not? And let us be honest, this is not the first time we have seen a fight over legacy and naming rights turn into a bigger political circus, and it definitely will not be the last. Every single time something like this happens, it becomes a flashpoint. People online pick sides instantly. Half the country cheers, the other half gets furious. And somewhere in the middle, the actual legal argument, the boring but critically important part, gets completely lost in the noise. That is exactly why it is worth slowing down and actually understanding what happened here instead of just reacting to a headline and moving on. So, yeah, at the end of the day, this story is not really about a building in Washington. It is about a much bigger question that is going to keep coming up again and again during this presidency. How far can one person push before the system pushes back? And this time at least, the system pushed back hard. Real hard. The removal of those bronze letters in the middle of the night behind a tarp wasn't just about fixing a legal violation. It was a statement. It was a signal that even the most powerful person in the country has to follow the same rules as everyone else. And when you break those rules, there are consequences. Those consequences might come in the form of a court order. They might come in the form of a humiliating late-night removal operation. They might come in the form of having your own Justice Department certify to a judge that your name has been completely erased from a building you tried to claim as your own. That's not a small thing. That's not a petty victory for one side or the other. That's the system functioning the way it was designed to function, with checks and balances that prevent any one branch of government from running roughshod over the others. And in this case, the judicial branch did exactly what it was supposed to do. It looked at what the executive branch had done, compared it to the law, and said, "This doesn't fit. This has to be undone." And then it was undone, not through political maneuvering, not through backroom deals, but through the straightforward application of the law. All right, that is the breakdown for this one. But trust me, this fight over names, power, and who really controls America's biggest institutions is far from over. So stick around, because next time we are diving into the next battlefield in this exact same war. And honestly, it might be even bigger than this one. See you in the next video.